we're doing the closing round from the third edition of the Evolutionary Leadership Community calls as part of the Consciousness Deep Dive.
Okay, Theodore said a couple things in particular that are striking to me. One, that somebody with $2 billion was not able to shift the direction of the hedge fund. Because I guess in that world, maybe $2 billion is a drop in the bucket. You know, so, and then the other was that there's, you know, supposedly $5 billion sitting in the EU somewhere to do climate work, but they don't know where to direct it. So that says that, you know, money alone can't solve the problem. Like first, you know, our consciousness and behavior has to change. Then, you know, then after that, I guess, hopefully the resources will follow in that direction. But I know it's a lot more complicated than that. But yeah, so I definitely think it's super hard to find those organizations that are doing good work, in part because they pop up and then they die, you know, like the system, the old paradigm kind of starves them to death. So yeah, so this is to some extent, you know, a question of survival, you know, at the individual level and the organizational level. And though that image that came out today of the father and son, the father and daughter who died, you know, trying to cross the river from Mexico into the U.S. That to me, you know, it's so symbolic because that's not the first time we've seen a picture like that. And it kind of shows that we're in desperate times now, in a very real way. So yeah, so somehow we have to find a way to raise the consciousness of the people around us and of ourselves.
No, thank you. Thank you for reminding us of what's going on in the world. And I think of all the you know, the fishermen and the fishing communities that you work with in Nama and how they're struggling, you know, in different ways, but it's part of the same systemic breakdown of an economy that doesn't work for people, ordinary people.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Yeah, and it's yeah, to me it's also I mean, there are many questions that are super practical and urgent and hard to be answered even with all theoretical understanding of all these kind of things. And the biggest, you know, core question is, to me, like over the last, some experiences that I had, like with places like my daughter's school, for example, that used to be this very progressive and beautiful culture, and it's been changing over the last couple of years, and we didn't notice it until this year. And kind of my wife and I had to put aside like 2 weeks of our time to really deeply go into that. And what we discovered was just absolute insanity, pushed by a few people on the administrative team. And you know, they basically made people who were embodying the old culture fired. And it's kind of recreation of those mainstream patterns. Like the board is run by a guy with Chicago Booth MBA. That's the school that's, you know, I attended for a short program where they taught us that the purpose of the business is to get as much money as you can without going to jail. So, and And the school is now heading in that direction as a multi-million-dollar business, which is really sad. And when I talk with teachers who love the old school and who love that culture, they were being brainwashed into believing that this is the only way for school to survive in the rising Oakland prices, by the housing crisis, the things like that. It's like, yes, Fyodor, we're very sad that these changes are happening, and we love that school, but we trust our leadership to steer us in the right direction, because otherwise the school will not survive financially. It's like, no, look at the numbers. These decisions are not even making sense economically. They are just trying to get rid of the cultural patterns that they are not comfortable with. And this is exactly the soul of a school. And you will just change the demographics of who attend the school. You will change the practices. And this school is like about activism and social change and all this kind of stuff. And this is fake. You will not be embodying the values that you're teaching the kids. And sooner or later, you will end up with families who are okay with that. And that's not good. So it's not only like the process how to shift mainstream institutions that are now in the old paradigm but could be in the new paradigm. It's also how to build the immune system of organizations that are already great, like NAMA, right? Probably, right? Like that school, like others who are surviving but are subject to assault from people with mainstream mindsets and with mainstream things. So yeah, sure. Sorry. Yeah.
So I know, Rosanna, you had to leave. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to hear you.
Thanks for inviting me. And I just want to say that was a really good point that you raised, Fyodor, that I think we have to first defend and protect what's left, what exists right now, while also, trying to change the rest of the world. But you're right, there's a process where good organizations and institutions get corrupted that we have to somehow ward against. But yeah, thanks for including me in the conversation. And yeah, I look forward to following up with you all in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I hope to
All
see
right.
you.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Would love to see you soon. Okay.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah, bye.
Awesome. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, we also have to like make sure that the people or the organization that are on the right way doesn't get sidestepped and moved back towards an old mindset, an old cultures. Because, like you said, it only takes like a virus of a sort in people in key positions having the wrong mindset to change, to steer something in the wrong way. And I think that's a good thing to keep in mind. And with that, we have to like, how do we actually scale up like actually evolve the teaching of good and better mindsets? And that's like a very hard question. There's no answer to it. And I've talked a lot this spring to Thomas Björkman, who has an institution, a foundation here in Sweden called Ekvärdet, where he's interested in scaling up this on a Nordic level and making what he wrote the book The Nordic Secret that Otto Scharmer mentioned in the last post as well. So if you haven't read his post, it's point 7 of the 7 points in his last post, Otto Scharmer there. And that, like, how do we in a national level teach enough people about the right way to think and do things, and like make them become curious and explore their own life and explore the world and go on a wisdom-seeking journey of life.
Yeah.
I'm thinking back to the end of the last conversation. before we started this one, where Spring Chen was talking about not judging behaviors as right or wrong, or the old paradigm is wrong and the new one is right, but seeing it as an evolutionary process, as a process of maturing. You know, if you use the analogy of a teenager, the teenager is becoming an adult. The teenager isn't gone as a person. You're not trying to push them back to toddlerhood either. You know, there's a you know, a transcending and including, or just a, you know, refining of these capacities that we have, you know, including all of our, you know, Western dominant culture models of metrics and outcomes and scaling, and all of this stuff has its place, but it needs to be in service to something, you know, much more mature than that. And but there is this question then of, you know, as that maturation happens, how much of that does get let go of, right? You know, we're not going to do whatever the equivalent is of, you know, binge drinking to go blotto and you know, escape things. We discover, you know, deeper forms of fun and value and transcendence that are healthier for us and those around us. And I think scale is one of those places. A lot of this money-related stuff feels very complex in that regard, right? The whole paradigm of investing and you know, that's the model, or that scale is the way to do things. Bigger is better, and efficiency, all of that stuff. My God, and I wrote a little bit after our forestry call too that we had with Kevin Jones and some others yesterday, kind of reflecting on some of these questions, because we were also talking about indigeneity and indigenous wisdom and how does that fit in. So I'm just noticing the themes, and I'm not feeling like I have answers. Even the idea of coming up with answers, right? That's still partly in that old model.
Yeah, like you've said, Fyodor, how to go from the model that getting away with as much as we can without going to jail to actually a model where we actually want to contribute and create value as a main product or a byproduct of what we do.
Yeah, I remember that story that that professor gave us. About like it was a different professor, but that in that program, about a marketing guru, and there is a Boy Scout knocking at the door and saying, "Sir, if you buy the subscriptions to magazines, you know, I'll be able to get an ice cream." And the guy saying to the kid something like, "I don't care about getting an ice cream. I care about what is it in it, and it's it for me, right?" And then shouting, slamming the door, or whatever. And then the guy basically, like the Boy Scout, goes to his father, who's a neighbor, and his father says, "Yes, this is our neighbor, Mr. X. He's a marketing guru, and this is what you should say." And then the Boy Scout comes again and knocks at the door and says, "Sir, I have some subscriptions for you. You should subscribe for this because of XYZ, and this because of, you know, ABC and stuff like that." And then the marketing guru buys all the subscriptions, even though you already have those subscriptions, because he thinks that he's giving this young boy good lesson. So he's like rewarding good behavior. So that, to me, this story is so telling, because the guy is not evil. He doesn't want to do harm to the boy. He doesn't want to upset the boy. He wants to do good to that boy. It's kind of an act of altruism, because he really buys something he does not need, right? So, I mean, he could have said, "Hey, I have all of those subscriptions, go to hell," right? But he actually rewards his behavior. But the patterns that he's reinforcing this child, thinking that he's doing him a service, are something that are so alien to me. It's like if I was in the place of that marketing guru, and a little boy is knocking at the door and saying, "I'll get an ice cream if you subscribe," I would be, "Yes, sure." I would be subscribing even if I had subscriptions, right? Most likely. But if this little boy is knocking at the door and saying, "Sir, I think you should buy the subscription because X, Y, Z," I would be like, "Oh my God, what's wrong with the guy? Like, who actually brainwashed this little child?" And right, it's like, I'm sorry, I don't need that, right? So. And this is like partially this is Russian, right? So it's like this these mental models that I inherited like from the Soviet Union mentality, which is like totally different. But part of it is just this idea that something different is possible, just caring about the other, and the fact that it's much, as Elizabeth Sartorius says, right, it's much more energy efficient to live in the world where people care about each other rather than try to grab from each other. And you don't have to spend this, and or the defense budget is an essence of this, right? So in the world that everybody is fighting with each other, you have to spend so much money on arms and war that is just not efficient. The same thing in personal life. You just have to spend so much money on status products, of creating an image, or of hiring a therapist for yourself because you're stressed and you cannot take care of your mental health and all that.
Or what's going on the southern border, and this, if we had thriving economies and stable governments and didn't have this corrupt drug trade, people wouldn't be fleeing for their lives and showing up here. They'd be happy to stay. Mm-hmm. We have to spend, more prisons. That's so here's my response to the Booth School and Chicago economics, and I think it picks up on what you're saying. I shared this on a call earlier today too. It's one of my favorite cartoons of all time.
That's hilarious. Yeah, that's awesome.
I just imagine this giant thing up in the sky.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. But you see, it's interesting that we're not dealing with people who are evil. We're dealing with people who are living in narratives that serve them in some capacity. And they want to see more of those narratives out there because they know how to live in those narratives. And showing a way for them to live in different narrative in a way that is better for them is something that's, how to do that at scale. That would be an interesting question.
I mean, don't you think there are some psychopaths and sociopaths as well who you could argue, in some way do embody evil beyond what's normally.
Well, yeah, no, for sure, but I think this is.
They wouldn't have any power if the vast majority of us who are not like that weren't acquiescing to that and buying.
Exactly. So I think it's like the minimal number. They could be in positions of institutional power, yes.
Well, I think we have systems that put them there, right? That's how,
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We reward them for that.
Absolutely. What you can get away with it without going to jail. I mean, Trump, perfect. But hopefully he'll be wearing clothing that matches the color of his skin in due course.
Yeah. So that's very interesting, and I'd be really curious to hear some broader reflections from different calls to see what patterns emerge there.
Yeah, we could do a little bit of that now if you want, Michael. I'm curious for you too, because you've been on now 3 of them at least, right? Maybe.
Yeah.
And of course, that's part of what we'll be doing on the 3 closing calls as well. And there is this whole record being compiled, a much too high a percentage of it by me for my preferences, but still there's a lot of good stuff there. from others, and I'm trying to pick up things from other people. Yeah, I'm curious, Michael, from your perspective. I was surprised too to hear you say that you didn't learn anything on the last call. I mean, in a way, not. Sure, were there new ideas flat out for me? Either, maybe not, but I still felt like I was learning something by witnessing it, and it felt nourishing.
Yeah, but like the experience of observing it was, of course, always giving, and I got some new thoughts there. But yeah, but you said, like, my thinking is, like, calls like this is something that we have to have a lot more people having all over the world for various reasons. It can be like you don't even have to discuss the things we do. You just the experience of having video calls with people from all over the world and discussing your favorite subject is like, this is still unheard of, or new to people, or uncomfortable doing things like this, and like really connect people. Like, instead of watching that extra hour of Netflix, you can hop on a random video call about the series you just watched on Netflix, and just that activity will connect people over the world. What are people in the Philippines thinking about my TV series, even if they're watching? There's at least some overlap. Oh, like Game of Thrones, people are watching that all over. And how do you connect to people around the world? Like, in that experience, like just that experience, I think we can go further on a way we haven't done before. Everyone has a smartphone now, and a lot of people have, at least. So, like Rehan, I talked to Rehan last week. Now he said, like, they have 97% 4G coverage in Pakistan. Like, that's not even here in the West we have that now.
He popped on our forestry call yesterday.
Yeah.
It's fun to see him and hear him. But yeah, Pakistan, he's got 1 million acres of land ready for tree planting there, I think. Someone is connected to. To pick up on your point about just the value of having conversations and connecting with people, different people across the world, I think in particular for me in AHA, I mean, that's always seemed obvious. Yes, we should do that, and text-based stuff on Facebook is so limited compared to speaking to one another. And I mean, we are face-to-face, right? People still use the term face-to-face to describe an in-person connection, but in many ways, I'm literally more face-to-face with the two of you here than I would be if we were, sitting in a bar. But there's something in particular about these conversations that I'm finding really exciting, which is, and I think I named it at the beginning of our call, right? That it's not purely social. We're not just talking to meet each other and, connect. We have some kind of shared inquiry and, purpose that we're in. It's not super outcome driven either. We're not on a team trying to, advance a piece of work and leave here with a list of 5 new things to do. That's also, so that's normally when we gather in groups of 3, 4, 5, 6, it's usually one of those 2 things, right? It's a social thing, or we've got work to do and we're driving hard for an outcome. If we're doing some other kind of connecting conversation, we're doing that a lot, but it tends to be one-on-one. And so the value of doing it, just going from 1, say minimum of 3, maximum of maybe 6, even above 6, it starts to feel like it's losing some of the coherent, close, integral kind of connecting energy that can happen. It fits with the theory of change that that makes the most sense to me if I want to tell a hopeful story about how we get out of all this. Is it's building these kind of mycelial level connections, and so it feels like a validation of the need for that, right? So when I think of what am I learning here, what are we learning, it's much more at the process level than it is the ideas and the content and the output. There's lots of that too, and that's interesting and juicy. Although even there, I think some of my favorite stuff is the music and the poetry, as much as the specific ideas. And I think just the last thing I'll say on this is that I'm really eager to see if we because this is such an abstract theme, this is consciousness deep dive, right? I mean, people can relate to it in their personal ways, but in terms of how it might catalyze action, how it might drive outcomes, which we all hunger for, or many of us, this is a tough context, tough container for that, right? But to take a process like this over the course of a month, made up of all these small conversations. I just learned today that one of my partners in convening, woman Maria Lorente Perez, convened a couple of iterations in Spanish in person in Spain, where she is. I didn't even know about them. So that could really be happening a lot. And the more sort of it's pointed at something that lots of people are working on, I think the more it could take off and that could happen. And so I'm excited to see where that could go, to get 10, 20 times the participation. When we do the pop-up gift economy phase of this that's coming up after we complete this week, that a lot more resources could be flowing through that, not just money, but other offerings and supportive work out in the world. So I'm excited to see where that goes, and really inspired by what's happened so far.
Yeah. Ben, by any chance, do you know Anthony Afford?
Yep.
Yeah. So have you been following the Flourishing Enterprise Institute's efforts that they are now making?
I connected with him years ago when he was just introducing his sustainable business model canvas, and I think that came out of it as a way to implement it. But so I tracked it a little bit, but I haven't stayed close.
I think they might use some help with the process of organizing hybrid conversations, so they have some two experienced facilitators on the team, and they're preparing for an in-person convening in Canada in August. But they now have this.
Peter Jones.
Yeah, Peter Jones is part of the core team. Yeah. So the Randy, Anthony, and Peter are, I think, the three main people. And there are amazing people in the group, including John Ehrenfeld, including Michael Cillian, including, because I'm on their advisory board. And basically, they have Lumio. Lumio.
By the way.
Oh, sorry.
All right.
That's fine.
Hi, Peter. Hi, Anthony.
Yeah. So, right. Yeah. So basically, but as far as I understand, like they could use some of your process skills to really organize this, the potential of the group that is distributed, which is your strong point, right? In ways that are super powerful. And I think what you've been working on over the last few years might really be of help. Yeah.
Maybe
so
there's
just
one cohort in a convening. I mean, you can do it internally within an initiative, but I'm always more excited by being, bringing together edges,
Yeah. So you can follow up with Anthony and say that I mentioned that, and or if you want, I can even send an email too.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, but yeah, it's I don't even know, because I'm on the periphery of the whole effort. I'm again on the advisory committee, and I'm trying to engage with some of the design calls, but I'm not in the stewarding capacity, so I'm just trying to connect and help steward that, because I think it has tremendous potential, and I really love what they're doing. And I
think it's useful for the recording too, and for my own thinking. Say a little more about what it is about the work they're doing that makes it a really juicy field for bringing in this kind of distributed.
Yeah, right. So totally. So we talked about how to stay sane in the world of insanity. And Michael was saying about how important it is to connect with people from different places around the world. So these folks, they don't just have a canvas or like a tool. So they have a network of people doing important work in different places in the world, and they want to mobilize, as far as I understand, it's my interpretation, they want to build a distributed organization with existing people and organizations like around the world being nodes of that institute, or Flourishing Enterprise Institute, participating in some capacity in research that is either contextualized locally where this node is located, or by topic, like different aspects like leadership or new venture development or evolution of the existing business, et cetera, and build infrastructure and design, institutional design for these nodes to collaborate on a very practice-oriented agenda. So from connecting deep academic efforts with very practical educational efforts and consulting efforts, changing the ways millions of leaders work in different sectors, so that their organizations are flourishing. And flourishing organization also, of course, takes into account the systemic context for this organization. So this is a way to help organizations align with the new paradigm rather than the old paradigm. And to me, this is super exciting. And the Institute for Evolutionary Leadership would be happy to be a node of that. So Manuel Manga just joined their Lumio. So I really love the idea. I love the work that they have been doing already, and we use their work. So we're first explorers of their canvas. So we have an agreement with that Anthony's organization, and we pair that with other research from our colleagues from University of Melbourne and all that. So the workshop that you can see I posted on Facebook yesterday, that uses some of their research as well. So this is very much aligned, and at the same time, it's also open for future development and for including different beautiful work that people are doing. And they are very strong in research, and they're very strong in community building. And I think that what you, Ben, have been doing over the last few years could help them organize a more structured and pointed process directed to specific coordination, right? To really help balance these exploratory phases with harvesting certain things and feeding them those things back into the process.
Sorry, you were in the middle of saying something, Fyodor, I think.
That's hilarious, and I'm glad that everything worked fine at the end, Ben. So that's great. So my point is that so I think that your process prototypes could really help them structure the emergent process in a way that is that takes advantage of what your discoveries over the last several years.
Really interesting. I mean, I'm hearing you talking about need for coordination, in this system is a much more outcome-driven focus than what we've been doing here. And it would be very interesting to try it in that context. And certainly the World Cafe this is based on, I mean, from what I understand, organizations use it for their budgeting, companies use it for their budgeting process. So you can be very outcome-driven in terms of at least generating a lot of collective intelligence, a lot of different ideas and possibilities that you can then work with in other ways, to find alignment. And in a process like this, you could pair in all kinds of different tools for finding that kind of alignment, for making decisions, something like Lumio, for example, right? I mean, Lumio is great, and it's all text-based. And so what if you did, stuff like this before you made it and even came up with your proposals that you put onto Lumio, and then you put the proposals onto Lumio, and then you talk about them this way, not just text-based.
That was exactly what I was sharing. Yeah,
right?
Exactly my words. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of, and some of it's not rocket science either, right? I mean, this isn't what we're doing here. Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, just if you want me to send something to them about you, let me know. Otherwise, you just follow up with Anthony and do it yourself.
Sure. So, send something that just sort of reconnects him. And Anthony will certainly remember me, as will Peter, who I collaborated with a couple of times.
Yeah.
Other, so back to your question about sort of the sense making and meaning making and the themes and patterns we're seeing. I'm curious, you know, if you've seen something, Fyodor, over the conversations we've had, or Michael, if there's something else that's showing up for you that you might want to name, maybe on the content side more, or since we're here. I do want to wrap up fairly soon too and take a little break before the next.
Yeah. Yeah, like just the last half year, I've been meeting interesting people, like who's really asking the big question about wisdom and sense making, and that's been a ongoing journey since I met Fyodor 2 years ago when I came to you, and I just found out about Jordan Hall and David Schmattenberger and their talk about this, and I connected with you and several people there, Ray Potter and Gregory Wendt as well. And so there's a lot of people like really looking into what the sense making and the wisdom seeking, and I think if we just can map out and coordinate it, there's something really big we can do around this. That was the feeling I got this year at Catapult as well in Oslo, when we spent a whole evening with Ashoka and talked with what I call weaving together all this. So.
Have you done a warm data lab?
No, not yet, but I haven't met Nora in person either, so I have to figure out a way to do that when she's in Stockholm. So.
Yeah, but I did a warm data lab in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool process, and yeah, that is. Yeah, I really love the idea of trans-contextual learning.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is also what I see in your processes a lot.
Yeah, this could certainly lend itself to that. I mean, I spoke to Nora, I don't know, maybe it's going on a year ago now, and we got kind of excited about trying to meet up when she was coming over here, and maybe trying a virtual warm data lab, and I pinged her again because she was at both the Transform conference and Reporting 3.0, both of which we're partnering in this, to see if maybe she would be able to join us for the Reporting 3.0 edition of the deep dive on Monday morning. But you know, these big important people, you become a star, and you know.
Yeah.
Hi, Nora.
We love you all.
Yeah, what are you going to do with these recordings, man, besides just making them available?
Well, it's a great question, and you know, I think part of the pop-up gift economy, I'm working on a budget right now, and I'm inviting people who have contributed, you know, substantively to the convening and hosting of Now What over these past 2 months, to make a request for a share of the pool of money that's gathered. And there's a portion of that pool that will go towards, you know, projects out in the world. We'll use co-budget to actually allocate that. Maybe co-digital also to winnow it down to, you know, just maybe 3, 4, or 5 projects rather than, you know, whatever shows up over the transom. But I'm thinking of adding something to the budget around working with the harvest materials in some different ways. So we'll have these things to share, but, you know, they're not easy to digest, right? And
yeah, that's what I think is like when you talk about, you know, different bits and pieces, given how scarce time is these days. So what would be the layers of harvest, I would say? If somebody could get like a glimpse into that, and if they're interested in digging deeper, they could go all the way to this harvested bits and pieces like raw data.
I mean, the other metaphor, to go back to my passion for fungi, is spores. You know, so I think that these recordings are like mushrooms. You know, the connections we're weaving and the networks we're tapping into are the mycelial mat. That's the real action of the fungi. It's where the value is mostly being created. But the mushrooms pop up, and other than, you know, being tasty and maybe blowing our minds, their main job is to cast billions of spores out into the winds to land wherever they will, and maybe seed new you know, mycelial mats, right? And so what is this? What does a spore look like? It's like like memes. It's that level, I think, or the 3-minute video, or the blog. The narrative work that you do is short enough that could be potentially spore-like. Although I think it's on the border between. I mean, to me, this is part of the question is how much of the value is reflecting back to the participants what they learned and experienced and said to deepen the value they.
Yeah, well, as a participant, I would really appreciate some effective way to see the patterns emerging from conversations that I was not part of. So yeah, I mean, that would be just super fun for me to watch, and I know that I won't have time to.
It's work though to go find those patterns, right? And a lot of work potentially. So
well, I mean, a World Cafe with people who participated in different conversations that would end up with a collective narrative would be a very low-key process, like very non-time consuming process to do that, but it's just one of the ways. Another would be another could be I don't know, maybe even textual analysis of transcripts from these bits and pieces, or even even for every bit that is recorded, just a tagline, and then a bunch of taglines, and then identifying patterns from these taglines.
There's a lot we could do. I mean, I really love Prezi as a format, and then taking a Prezi and turning it into a short video. There's so much, and I think part of the question is just what people will be excited to do and will find to be valuable in its own right. And yeah, if we can get a little financial flow to support it, that would be good. So I think I'll put something into the budget. Maybe we try convening a World Cafe in July just to generate a collective narrative, rather than trying to take, because Ken and I talked about these closing round calls that are coming up, and it just felt a little constrained to try to use them to fit into what you needed. But I think if we convened a specific cohort of people to do it, and gave them a little time to also go through the harvest materials before they show up for the conversations, then it could work. Because even though this is based on a World Cafe, right, we are really lacking the intense experience of cross-pollinating ideas in the moment, right? When you go from one table to the next table to the next table, and then you harvest. So when these conversations are stretched out in this way, it's hard even for me to say, here are the 5 themes, that are most obvious to me. Whereas if I was in that, World Cafe over 3 hours, right?
And that is why there shouldn't be one person who is trying to come up with the themes. But if there are people who have
if anybody could do it, it's me, because I'm in it much more than anybody else, right? But I'm finding it hard because of the way that it's stretched out, which doesn't mean we can't do it. But I think we need a little bit more of an intentional container to surface that.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I agree. But look, if we have like 10 people even, and it would be even better if it's like 20 people who were in different conversations and who are coming up with personal reflections on conversations they were part of, so they would be at least subconsciously informed by those conversations and experiences. But also, of course, each of them will have their personal bias. But there will be 20 different biases. Which would be by itself a sample from the field in a way. And they would be informed, they would be influenced by those conversations. And if we, and then we have a collective narrative out of that, and then these would not be representation of all these different conversations directly, but indirectly, it could be something that would be a good approximation for us to look at this conversation through 20 different perspectives, in a nutshell, right? And that would be fun.
Yeah. So I'm happy to put that in the hopper as a plan, and to invite you to make a budget request for a share of the pool of money that's raised to spec that out. Or maybe we do that together, offline, not while doing this recording. But this is exciting, because this is how the pop-up gift economy element is now coming to life for me, right? Is to say, the old model would be, I did all the work to make this happen, y'all give me some money. If you appreciated what I did, if you created some value, give me some money. But what I'm doing instead is saying we want a gift economy with flows happening in multiple directions, right? And so how can we build on what's here to be generative? And here's a perfect example where you have something that can plug into this, right? And you know,
look, and I'd be totally happy to volunteer the effort because I know that.
I mean, it's a gift economy, so I'm proposing we do it anyway, but it's not volunteering, right? And it is part of a, you know, there's a financial element to what comes out of this, to what is going to be catalyzed by this. It may be very tiny, but my sense is the bigger we make it, the juicier we make it, the more exciting, the more people are involved, the more effective the ask is. So when we go to people and say, actually, we're trying to raise $15,000 out of Now What. You know, that's our target to fully fund not only the work that's been done, but the work that is yet to be done to completely land the value that is here. That you
yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense to me.
And I don't know what'll happen, but I want to test it out.
Sure. Yeah, and again, I'm happy to do it. Completely trusting your process. For the beauty of it, I see the potential. Just like my heart trembles when I go to meetups, like about homelessness, for example, when they have a lot of people with multiple perspectives and something juicy is coming just out of the check-in, and then they said, okay, thank you, and now we're going to do a speaker series. It's like, no.
Yes, and here's one other learning for me, right? So these recordings, and here we are in one of the most extended ones, which is really kind of interesting because they start as this final round harvest, right? But then some of them we just stay on and we're riffing and the recording keeps on going, and maybe someone will watch this, probably not. But one of the best conversations we had, I think one of the juiciest ones, was the one on Tuesday this week with Stephanie Mines, where she was bringing in themes of indigeneity and racism and social justice and new paradigms of leadership as the context for our work. And it went really deep. We went into the breakouts, and it was very hard to suggest that we even end those conversations after 45, 50 minutes. They were sort of just cooking, but you know, wanted to honor the time and all that, and let's come back for closing. And we wound up not recording it. And it just flowed into the closing. And at a certain point, I'm like, do I interrupt this to say, hey, should we record, and do my little spiel like I did for, you know, before this one and the others? And I didn't. And what really was kind of the aha for me in that was, because we were talking a lot about indigenous wisdom, right? This notion that if somebody says something and we don't capture it and grab it and package it and redeliver it, that it didn't matter, that we lost something essential. That's a very Western colonized, outcome-driven perspective, right? And as Spring Cheng was saying earlier, it's not that that's bad, it's not that that isn't useful, but this sense that, oh shit, you know, if we didn't do that, we fucked up. In that moment, I let go of it. I'm like, you know what? We're an indigenous, you know, we're trying our best as totally colonized white men, you know, or people that have been colonized by white men, even if they're not that, to let go of our sense that that's so important. And in this moment, to me, it felt like a kind of a, so.
Again, yes, and yeah, I totally hear you. This is hilarious. This is, I mean, this is great. And again, so everything is, there is a balance in everything, right? There is value in, like, for example, sometimes you see that I post pictures on Facebook from some conversations with some people. Like you remember, probably I posted a photo of you and me.
It's the cutest thing. You're traveling to, what's your phrase?
Oh, Facebook banned that. I can no longer post it. I was doing it for several years.
Great hack.
Yeah, they closed the hack. I cannot do that anymore. Yeah, so I used to do that. But yeah, I was like posting this.
What was the phrase? We're traveling to a
just sustainable and flourishing future. They figured out somehow that this is not a place, and they closed it, and I cannot do that anymore. So, yep. So, but anyway, so these in some cases, I tag people whom were mentioned in the conversation, right? And so these create some connections, sometimes in cross-pollination and things like that. But this is a tip of the iceberg of conversations I'm having. I'm not posting every conversation with everybody, right? It's like maybe, I don't know, 10% of all conversations, even less, right? And so I totally get that. And it's unhealthy to try to capture everything and show everything and things like that. However, also, there is tremendous value that I see in communities reflecting on themselves. And this is something that can be served by trying to balance different perspectives, distill it in a balanced way, and feed back to the community. Because everybody who builds these connections, they are kind of navigating complex community through their own lens, and they see their little sub-bubble. And whenever this distillation process gives you a fairly balanced view, there is a lot of learning for everybody, and it helps aligning efforts, etc. Just that, right? So, and that said, totally hear you, and that's perfect.
And I love that about your process, that it's very much a balanced view and valuing all voices. Yeah, Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, like Fjord says, we could spend a whole lifetime watching our own lifetime if we like. so you can't record your whole life, and then who's going to watch your whole life? That takes a whole lifetime to watch.
Except your Rehan. Hello, Rehan.
So you have to really find a balance in that, and not everything that you think is important, on the other way around. Things you don't think are important can be important. So there, it's really random, and that's what we have to get better at. That's what part of seeking wisdom and consciousness. What part are worth telling to others, and what part are just there to being experienced in the moment. So, and this is a skill we all that it takes a lifetime to learn, but as we get better at it, we can teach others to get better at it as well. And we're just in the beginning of using all the digital tools and social media and internet to doing this. So this is unexplored territory for all of us, mostly, but some of us have done it for many years now, but it is still in the cradle of what it can be.
Exactly. If humanity is a teenager maturing in terms of our internet stuff, we are babies, like you say.
Yeah.
Just learning how to talk.
But I have many interesting conversations, especially with Bertola, who was in the call on Monday, because he's the guy who's been exploring this the most, probably.
Mm-hmm.
He says, he spends 8 hours per day just liking stuff, and like he says, there's a hard limit of liking 300 posts per hour on Facebook, then you get banned. Stuff like that. It's really funny talking about him. He's extreme in some ways.
It's so funny.
Yeah.
We shared there's a lot of derision, of course, rightly so, of all this activity. On one of the calls, the play and celebration call earlier this week, there's this guy who's kind of a prankster and satirist, Ori Alon, and he lives in Beacon, New York, and there was a project to destroy a sidewalk for some development, and it got picked up on Facebook, and all these people were on Facebook, saying what a terrible idea it was. He printed out the whole thread and plastered it along the barrier, like they put up, plywood barriers on the construction site, and he covered it with the whole Facebook thread, and it got written up in the local papers, and they changed their minds, and they preserved the sidewalk, and it changed their whole process for even, you know, thinking about development, and it got written up in the New York Times.
Wow.
Yay,
That's amazing. Yeah, that's really amazing. Is it? Yeah, I should Google it. What are some of the keywords for that?
Oh, it's in some of our harvest material, I think. But Ori Alan is his name. I'll connect you with him. And actually, there's a little write-up on that that's in the harvest materials for. He created a whole Google Drive. I'll share you on that. That has both his stuff and stuff that other people that he follows have done. He's like a one-man version of the Yes Men, kind of, you know.
Cool. That's awesome.
Hey, Ori.
Well, I think that was a great harvest.
I agree. Thank you for the prompt to do it, Piotr. I think I might actually be losing weight during now what, because I'm eating so much less because I'm on Zoom all day. Michael's back in his car. You driving on the wrong side of the road?
Yeah, we're no. My friends are driving in the front here. So
Oh, okay.
Assumptions. Yeah, I was assuming the same thing, by the way.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm not driving, I'm riding.
Thank you all, and I'll see you when I see you. I'm glad we hatched this little
awesome
plan.
conversation. Yeah, let's continue this.
All right.
Ciao.
Have a good one.